So if you've ever been arrested, I know that the experience is probably one that's really scary, and especially if you're somebody who's just witnessed a friend or a loved one get arrested, I know you're probably thinking, what do I do? How do I help? What happens next? And so I'm criminal defense attorney Hannah Akintoye, and what I'm going to do is explain to you the entire arrest process from start to finish so that you know what this process is and what happens during this entire process. Now, the first thing that you have to know about being arrested is that before a police officer can ever put anybody under arrest, there has to be probable cause to arrest. And the basic definition of probable cause means that a crime has been or is currently being committed, and the police officer believes that you are the one who committed that crime. And so if a police officer has probable cause to arrest, then they can put you in handcuffs. And so that's step one. Typically, when an arrest is initiated, the police officer will put you in handcuffs, and usually the handcuffs will be behind your back. Then the second thing that happens is that the police officer will search you incident to arrest. And so usually if you are a male officer will search. If you're a female officer will search you. And typically what they're doing is they're searching for weapons, or they're searching to see if you have any property. And so if you have weapons, obviously they'll take that. Depending on what the weapons are, like if it's a gun and you're not licensed, they're typically going to charge you for those things. And that will be a completely different charge from whatever you're actually being arrested for. Now, when it comes to your property, so this is the third thing that happens, is they're going to actually itemize your property. So if you have money, they'll count your money. If you have a wallet, they'll indicate that as well. They'll typically take off your jewelry as well. What I've also found is that if there are things that you have in your possession that may be a safety concern, they'll also remove that and put them separately into a property bag for you. So I've typically seen, like, if you're wearing sneakers or any shoes that have shoelaces, they are going to remove your shoelaces from your shoes, just because that could be like a suicide watch type of issue. And so anything that could resemble anything that would allow you to hurt yourself, they are going to remove those items and then put it in your property. So that's the third thing that happens. Then once your items are separated and they are in your property bag, the fourth thing that happens is that you'll be transported to a police station. Most of the time you'll be in either like the back seat of a patrol vehicle. In other situations, you'll be in a bigger van. Sometimes they call it a transport vehicle, where it's actually a van. So you can actually hop into the back of the van, and there'll be seats on the left side and the right side. That's usually in situations where there are a lot of people getting arrested at once. But every now and again, there'll be a transport vehicle or van available where it's just you or it's just one person. But that isn't always the norm. But either way, you're transported to a police station from there. Then the fifth thing that happens is that now that you're at the police station, they have to book you. And what that means is that they're going to take your fingerprint and they're going to take your mugshot as well. And all of these things are essentially placed into their police database. And so now that you are at the police station, the sixth thing that could happen is that a police officer may try to interview you. Now, this is where lawyers always say, keep your mouth shut, right? Because at this point, there's really not much that you can say that will undo the fact that you are arrested. In fact, most of the time when you speak at this point, you're really just digging a bigger hole for yourself. Because if they have probable cause to arrest you, they're not going to just release you just because you provide them with a statement, or most importantly, if you admit to the crime, right? That's not going to help them release you. In fact, that will be added to the affidavit that they will later prepare that tells a judge why you were arrested and why they had probable cause to arrest you. So most lawyers will tell you to keep your mouth shut. No matter what they promise you, they are not a judge. And so they don't get to decide what happens at the end of the day in your case. They're also not a prosecutor. And so they also don't get to decide what happens during the course of your case, because it's truly a prosecutor that charges you in the first place. So the sixth thing that could happen is that a police officer may want to question you. That is when they read you your Miranda rights, right? You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to an attorney. If you cannot afford an attorney, one would be appointed to you. And so they'll read you all these rights, and then they'll ask you, do you want to waive these rights and speak to me? right? That's what the police officer will ask. And the answer should be, no, I would like to have an attorney present. And that's it. And typically questioning should end at that point. If you've asserted your right to have an attorney present, or if you've asserted your right to remain silent. So that's when your Fifth Amendment privilege actually really comes into play. Now that you've been arrested, what you say can be used against you. So this is where you really just want to not say or do anything that could harm or jeopardize where you currently are already. Then the next thing that happens is, usually at the police station, you'll be sitting around for a while, but eventually what will have to happen is that you're going to have to go in front of a judge to determine whether or not you will be held in jail or if you will be released. Now, in very rare circumstances, while you are at the police station, you could receive a citation. Now, a citation means that they're actually letting you go from the police station and you just have a date and a time to show back up in court. Usually when you're given a citation, that usually happens if it is a very low level charge, or if you have like 0 to no criminal history and the guidelines allow for you to be released on a citation. So if you get a citation, that's a great thing. You've just cut the process in half. And that's really good, because that means you have little to no criminal record at all, and you're allowed to leave from the police station and then just simply show up in court on a later date. Now, for the people who are not getting citations, this is when you get transported to go in front of a judge. And it's usually a magistrate judge, which is a judge that handles very specific low-level things. Oftentimes bail is one of those things. And the judge typically decides whether you will receive bail or not. And in every state, this is a little bit different. So there are many states where you either receive a bail amount or you get held in jail permanently. And so bail typically means that they'll set a monetary financial amount that you will have to pay to ensure that you're going to show up in court. And this can get really complicated. They can do secured, unsecured, all types of things. But ultimately, bail simply guarantees that you'll show back up in court. So if you don't show up in court, then they keep your money. But if you do show up in court and the case is over, then you get your money back. And that's essentially what the bail process is. But in jurisdictions like Washington, D.C., where I'm located, it's a little bit different. There is no formal bail process. And so what happens is the judge simply gets to decide if you get held in jail or if you are released, right? They don't do the process of deciding what your bail will be, if there's a monetary amount associated with that. And so usually for people with little to no criminal history, oftentimes you're getting out of jail. But if it's a very serious crime, you may be held in jail for a little bit longer. Now, just because you're initially held in jail doesn't mean that you'll stay there forever. There are usually opportunities for your attorney to eventually file motions and show the judge why you deserve to be released, even though you've been charged with a very serious crime. But just because you're initially held in jail by a formal judge does not mean that you'll be there forever. It's usually very, very serious cases. We're talking typically cases that are considered violent, cases where people were seriously hurt, that oftentimes that's something that you'll typically need to worry about. So now, once you've reached a point where a judge has decided whether you'll get bail or not, this is often the time frame when you're also appointed an attorney as well. So this is where if you don't have an attorney, one can be appointed to you, and so you will be appointed an attorney around this time, because this is a very critical stage of you being either incarcerated or being released. Now, if you can afford your own lawyer, you will have an opportunity to hire your own attorney as well. You can typically have them come to this hearing if you have friends or family available who can hire somebody that quickly, but that isn't often the case. So there is usually around this stage where there's an attorney that is appointed to represent you, and then that doesn't have to be the final say with respect to your representation. You can always hire whomever you choose to hire for the duration of your case. Now, once you have either been held or released, the final thing that typically happens is that you get a court date. And so typically when you get your court date, this is essentially where your case starts. There are things and there's progress that should be happening at every single court date. But the most important thing that you'll want to do is abide by any release conditions that you get if you are released. And so that could be anything from calling into a pretrial services agency or meeting up with a pretrial services officer. Sometimes you'll have to drug test regularly, or you may have to take classes while you're on release. There's so many different conditions that can be placed on you, and you want to make sure that you abide by these conditions while you are being released so that you can remain released and so that they don't put you back in jail while your case is pending. So if you have a friend or you have a loved one that is going to need to pick you up right after you get released from a magistrate judge, then usually they'll want to meet you at the courthouse or whatever location that the magistrate judge usually sits to decide whether you're released or not. Every now and again, if you're released at the police station, then that friend or that loved one will want to meet you at the police station if that's where you are in fact going to be released, and that's if you have a citation. So that essentially is the entire arrest process. If you have any questions, always feel free to comment your questions below, and I'm happy to answer them. And most importantly, if you found this information helpful, like and follow for more.